Hello everyone, Deanna here with the Balfour project, and we are having a lecture today with Dr. Alon Liel. So hello there, welcome. And just going to wait while everyone sort of comes in and joins us. And so I'm going to take this opportunity before I introduce our speaker. I'm going to talk a bit about our upcoming events while you're here. Hello Rada. I was going to say that our first point is please address any comments, any questions that you have for our speaker in the chat box, and we will have a Q&A session after about half an hour or so. So please do note your questions in there, and we'll try to get around to all of them. We're always inundated with questions, but we try to address as many of the questions or the topics as possible. And yeah, I just wanted to tell you about our next talk on the 8th of October. It is with Ian Black, who is a former editor and Middle East correspondent for The Guardian. He's now a senior fellow, visiting senior fellow, the Middle East Center at LSE. So he's going to be talking to us about Zionism and the Palestinian mandate, the mandate of Palestine. So please do join us for that. It'll be absolutely great. As always, we've got on the 27th of October, our conference on Jerusalem. And so we would very, very much like you all to join us. It's a free conference, it's online. We'll be, I need you to watch this space because we'll be advertising how to register very soon, and we'll be sharing the schedule. There will be different sections on religion and history and politics and so forth. So you can join us for some or all of it, hopefully all of it. Right, so I can see now that you're kind of all joined us, and hopefully we'll have a few more. So I would like to start by introducing Dr. Alon Liel, who is a former Israeli diplomat. He has served as ambassador to South Africa, which I'm sure he'll talk about, and we've had quite a few questions on that and the comparison, so looking forward to hearing about that. He has also been the Consul General of Israel to Southern Eastern United States, as well as the Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Economy and Planning. And he's been very kind in agreeing to talk to us today. So, Doctor, I'm going to hand over to you. Welcome and thank you very much.
Thank you for hosting me. Good afternoon. I know that it's the Balfour project organizing the whole event, and I don't know how many of you know that the Balfour project here is a huge project now. The Prime Minister lives on Balfour Street, and the project is to move him out of there. This is called now in Israel the Balfour project. Take the Prime Minister out of Balfour. Let me just see, I kind of lost sight of myself. Let me just reconnect to, never mind. I hope you see me.
I think you've switched off the video.
I switched off the video. How do I switch it on again? 1 second. Here.
Yes. Oh, you're switched on and then off again. Oh, there you are. Yes, we can see you now.
1 second, I have to see myself. What am I doing here? I still do not see myself. Never mind, as long as you see me, it's okay. I wanted to start by saying that it's becoming very difficult to analyze what's going on in a world of fake news. I remember 30, 40 years ago, researchers, commentators used to take the word, the oral word, the written word, and work with it, and analyze it by the content. It's over. Many leaders, big part of the world, are cheating all over without even paying any price You can even not sense it on the body language, and we have to maneuver in this world, taking into consideration that everybody is cheating us. What I will do today, I'll start by analyzing what happened to us during this deal, UAE annexation deal. What are the regional implications? I'll focus a lot on the regional implications, and then I'll move to the Israeli-Palestinian scene as it is after the deal, and tell you a little bit about the surprises we had during this process in the last few months. Let me just make another effort to see myself. And here, now I see myself. That's it. That's it. Okay, so first the deal itself. The deal itself. I must tell you that when we had the coalition agreement written, signed in Israel, few months ago, about 5 months ago, it looked to many of us here as the end of the world, as the end of the world. The coalition agreement said, I remember it was June, that on the 1st of July, annexation will be applied. And Netanyahu worked it out in such a way that he had the signatures of the two leaders of a party called Blue and White, Gantz and Ashkenazi, and he had a very clear parliamentary majority for the annexation. I'm sure, knowing him, I think at least 35 years, that this was the dream of his life. This was what he saw as his place in history. He worked, all the efforts around building the coalition were around this deal. And he was determined to start on the 1st of July and finalize it by the end of July or maximum August, because he did not want to be dependent on the result of the elections in the United States. And then things started rolling. Europe said they don't like it. Here and there were voices against it internationally, especially coming from Jordan, but no meaningful opposition that could be a hurdle that he could not pass. And then I think we had in this process the first major surprise that I think surprised me, of course, but I think most of us, and this was the Emirates, UAE, United Arab Emirates. They never, ever played a role in this region, never, ever got involved in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Nobody in the analyzing the political situation here gave them any weight. And here came an interview of their ambassador in Washington to the biggest paper in Israel, Yediot Achronot, in which he said, "You will not annex, we will normalize." You all remember it. I must tell you, I was amazed to see the impact this interview had on the Israeli leadership. I still did not know everything that was behind it. It was difficult to guess, but I saw immediately the following day of this interview did not look the same when the annexation story was concerned. Now we know much more that the relations between the Emirates and the United States carry such a weight because of the arms deals and so on. But at the time, we were not so much aware of it. But we saw there was a change. I still maybe not a U-turn, but there was a change, and politicians here and the political diplomats, the diplomats that Netanyahu appointed abroad, said we have a different ballgame, a different ballgame. And then, as you all know, the deal came about. And the deal had three major components. One, the suspension of the annexation. Two, normalization between Israel and the Emirates. Three, total sidelining of the Palestinians, kind of stabbing the Palestinians in the back. And these were the three components of the deal. By the way, by then, we didn't know about Israel agreeing for the sales of F-35 aircrafts to the Emirates, silently or not silently. We didn't know it. It was not a component then. But these were the three components. And here I must tell you, not only between left and right in Israel, or two-state supporters or one-state supporter, even inside the Israeli peace camp, inside the Israeli left, the reactions were very, very different, very different. Some saw it as a positive move, many saw it as a negative move, and your best friends on which you agree on everything sometimes could not agree with you on this one. I'll tell you how I saw this agreement. I saw two of the three components as positive and one as very negative. But still, when I summed it up to myself, I saw a 2-1 win. A 2-1 win. The first win, or the first positive element, was the suspension of the annexation. There was, as I saw it and analyzed it, nothing that could stop the annexation except this deal. And this is a huge blessing, huge blessing. I know that many people say that in practical terms, Israel already annexed, and it's only adding a de jure element to a de facto reality, but this is not a situation. Annexation is a legal move, irreversible move, as we saw in the case of the Golan Heights, as we saw in the case of East Jerusalem, and I thought it's almost a miracle that Netanyahu had a clear majority for it in the Knesset and in his government, didn't bring it for a vote, and it was prevented. So I saw it as very positive. I know that many people say it's not fully over. We can then continue to discuss it. The second positive thing, as I see, is warm peace with an Arab country. We never ever had, in the 72 years of the state of Israel, a warm peace with an Arab country. We had a warm peace with a Muslim country for about a decade with Turkey. But what we have with Egypt and Jordan is very, very far from a warm peace. It is an important peace, it is of strategic importance, but the main component in the relations we have with Egypt and Jordan is security. And the second component is security, and the third is security. And we do what they need security-wise, intelligence-wise, and so on. but there are no other dimensions to this peace agreement. It's like a tree, a very fruitful tree. It's beneficial to two countries, but with one root, the security root. Now we see with the Emirates a very, very different picture. It's overt, it's over the table, there are flights, there are agreements, there will be economic deals, there will be tourism, we are looking for cultural relations and so on. And I think the most important element that is positive is that for the first time in the history of Israel, I see a public reaction of Israel of elements of admiration to the achievements of an Arab country. The Israelis look at Dubai and Abu Dhabi and every kid in Israel, and I know I have 7 grandchildren, all of them want to fly to the highest tower in the world, in Dubai. I don't know. The photos of the Emirates hit the Israeli public by surprise, and there is a wish of every company, of every NGO, of every sport team now to be connected, to get funds, to invest, to visit. We never had it. We never had it. It will have an impact if it goes on, on the Jewish public, but also on the Arab public in Arab society in Israel, that suddenly can show the Jewish part there is more in the Arab world than what you see around in Syria or Lebanon or Iraq. There is more into it, and I think this is very positive. I told you there is one devastating negative element also, and this is what happened to the Palestinians. They were totally marginalized with this deal, totally marginalized. And it was so insulting and embarrassing to them that they couldn't even notice the annexation disappearance and consider it as positive. They were shocked by the fact that an Arab country is going to normalize relations with Israel, totally bypassing and ignoring them and so on. And this is having implications on the morale there, on the political, regional, diplomatic standing, and this is a blow, a big blow to the two states idea, and in a way balancing the positive element of the suspension of the annexation that could ruin the idea of the two states. But what happened with this deal is also a blow to the two states from this dimension. I want to move to the regional implications. In the regional implications, we also have to consider 3 components. One, will there be a spillover? This deal with the Emirates in itself is not a game changer in the region. Again, the Emirates are very rich and can play a role on the economic side, but they are not a major player politically. If it doesn't spill over, the effect is quite limited. If it will, we have to see who else is joining. There were already talks about Bahrain and Sudan, and so far nothing happened. Something that looks like happening, but we still have to follow and see if it will happen, is Jerusalem. Jerusalem. Suddenly, we see countries announcing to African countries but also others. And now we saw recently Serbia and Kosovo that they are opening embassies in Jerusalem. This in itself is very important to the Israeli government. As a result of the move of the American embassy to Jerusalem, only one country in the world, Guatemala, moved its embassy to Jerusalem. It's a big disappointment here in Israel. Some started all kinds of semi-fictitious economic, cultural offices, but embassies in Jerusalem with only two. If we'll have 4 or 5 more joining now, as a result of the Emirates momentum, this will be meaningful. This will be meaningful. Also, you can ask if this is really a result of the Emirates momentum or again of Trump putting pressure on these governments to move to Jerusalem to help himself in the elections and to help his friend Netanyahu. More important on the regional element is the issue of the Balkanization of Israel. In the last 20 years, or maybe 15, Israel decided to drop the Middle East as a regional option. I grew up in an era in which at least the diplomacy of Israel saw the integration in the Middle East as a major issue. I don't know how many of you remember the slogan of Shimon Peres, the new Middle East. This was the dream. Our parents left Europe, had to leave Europe, or other countries because of or Zionist reasons or as refugees. And we are here to stay and to build our future in this region, in the Middle East. And this was the goal, this was the dream. Oslo had an economic aspect and so on. In the last 15 years, there was a U-turn in Israeli democracy. The leaders of Israel from the beginning of this century, like Lieberman, foreign minister, and Netanyahu, and Bennett, and others, did not believe that we will achieve peace with the Palestinians. So the conclusion was that we will never really be fully accepted by the Middle East. So if this is the case, let's go to another neighborhood. I think this change, moving to Eastern Europe, to the Balkan, Greece, Cyprus, Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, all this started around 2004, 2005, but received a great push at the end of 2008, and especially in May 2010, when our alliance with Turkey collapsed, disappeared. In the last decade, Turkey became a hostile country to Israel. And Israel responded. We needed Turkey very much, especially security-wise. We were training in the skies and on the seas of Turkey, and we were developing arms systems in Turkey that was very important for our military industries. And here we lost Turkey. And we rushed to strengthen this alliance with Eastern Europe, with the Balkan, and the success was enormous. And one of the results was, for those of us who watch us from Europe, Europeans, was that we almost completely neutralized the ability of the EU to be a player in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because the 10 plus countries of Eastern Europe became suddenly, I don't want to use a strong term like in our pocket, but became pro-Israeli in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and there was over 1/3 of the countries in the EU that worked against any EU decision when it came to the Israeli-Palestinian scene. So, and this was extremely, extremely important to Israel. Another dimension that made our Balkanization so important was gas. We needed to export gas. And the plan was to do it to Turkey, but when we couldn't do it with Turkey, we signed an agreement with Jordan, backed by the United States, guaranteed by the United States, and then sell small amounts just recently to Egypt. But the long-term plan is to do it with Cyprus, through Greece to Europe. And here again, we are dependent on Greece, Cyprus, and others in Europe. Also, there is a conflict, as you know, very recently deteriorating between Turkey and Greece. And we support Greece militarily. And if there will be a conflict, military conflict between Turkey, Greece, and Turkey, Cyprus, we are a player. I'm not sure if we'll be involved in actual fighting, but definitely in assisting Cyprus and Greece in their battle against Turkey. So this is now our neighborhood. This is our neighborhood. The question is if the deal with the Emirates can pull us back to the Middle East. It's a little bit early to tell, because it depends a lot if we really give up the issue of the annexation and even in a way slow down the issue of the settlements. The commitment not to annex is a Netanyahu commitment to the Americans. But Netanyahu will not always stay around, and he has a strong opposition to his right that did not give up the annexation dream and will fight for it. So if the annexation will be somehow revived, even orally, if the world will accept the fact that Netanyahu and his government or his successors will have the annexation as a plan, I don't see the deal with the Emirates really normalizing. And if it will not be normalized, we stay in the Balkan. Our region will be the Balkan. The benefits, the economic, political, cultural benefits of becoming Europeans, not EU, but Europeans with so many friends in Eastern Europe were enormous. I want to go to the third dimension of the deal, and this is the Palestinians. This is a huge tragedy, because there is an unbelievable gap between the world support for two states and what the Palestinians are achieving on the ground. I hesitate if to call this world support for two states a consensus, because the American support for it is lip service. They don't care about the Palestinian state, but it's only Trump. And if Trump will be replaced, the Americans come back to the two states with the Democrats. And the whole world stands with the UN, the whole world stands behind the issue of two states. So here the the gap between what the world wants to happen and what is happening on the ground has to close. It has to close. I see the main factor on this issue as the coming elections in the United States. The difference between the Democrats and the Republicans in the United States on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is very, very meaningful. And I think this is something for us to monitor. Definitely the United States is the most important player here on this issue, also because of, at least today, its involvement in parts of the Arab world. But here I want to say that Britain, I see Britain as the second most important country globally after the United States on this issue, especially because Britain is out of the EU. As I explained, the EU is paralyzed as EU, as Brussels, not as individual countries. Germany still is a player and France is a player, not many more meaningful players in Europe as individual countries. But as the EU, because of the internal opposition of these 10 to 12 countries that support Israel when it comes to the conflict, Britain is much more independent in what it can do for the Palestinians. And here again, you know, all of you, and the Prime Minister in Britain, Boris Johnson, said it. It's or two states or apartheid, and it's so clear. It's so clear, and if it's apartheid, it's a different Israel. But the problem is that most of the Israelis do not care. They do not care. They prefer to stick to the land and keep the settlements and lose the democracy because the world is not democratic anymore and so on. But I think this is still what we can work on internationally, explaining, especially the world, not the Israeli public that doesn't give a damn, to the world, that without two states, there will be no democratic one state. Israel will never allow big numbers of Palestinians to vote in their elections, because then in a decade or two, we can have a Muslim or an Arab prime minister. Israel will not allow it. So the option is not two states or one state. It's two states or apartheid, or apartheid. Now the big question is, can the world tolerate an apartheid, or is the world different than 30 years ago in South Africa when it couldn't tolerate an apartheid and forced the apartheid to fall? I don't know. Many of you have much better answers to this question than I have. I want to add another dimension that was a big surprise, and this will be my last comment. The Jewish world. Many of us, I think all of us here in Israel, but many of us also in the Jewish world, were surprised how fierce was the Jewish world opposition to the annexation. It surprised us because there is no fierce Jewish opposition to the occupation, not at all. If you, I don't know how many Jewish people are watching us, but most of the Jews in the world who support Israel do not use the word occupation. They say there is no occupation. And suddenly, when annexation came to the agenda, the Jewish world suddenly understood that it's or two states or apartheid, and they don't want an apartheid Jewish state. They will have a problem to identify with an apartheid Jewish state. So the opposition in the Jewish world surprised the Israeli politicians. It came from all over the world. Of course, mostly the United States, but also the rest of the communities stood up against it. I know that there were Jewish delegations to 21 embassies, Israeli embassies, to protest the annexation. The message was sent to Jerusalem, and here the minister was from Blue and White, not from Likud. They were very impressed. I think what the Jewish world realized, that if we will not have two states, Israeli and Palestinians, we will end up with two different Jewish people. The Jewish people that will support the apartheid and the Jewish people that will oppose the apartheid. And here I want to say that the second most important Jewish community in the world in this respect is the Jewish community in Britain. It's big. It always lived in a democratic environment. It can communicate easily with American Jewry, and such a coalition of American Jewry and British Jewry against annexation or against the possibility of apartheid is very meaningful. So let me conclude here. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much for that. That was so interesting. We have a lot of questions coming in. I think most of the questions were directed just to me, so perhaps the other attendees haven't seen all the questions coming in. So I've tried to back them into themes for you, because we've had several questions, as you can imagine, on the same topic. So if you just bear with me, I will ask you. First one that came in was from Brendan O'Brien. Do you agree that the annexation plan will mean that a de facto occupation will be declared to be de jure with no change on the ground, except the creeping displacement of Palestinians will be emboldened? I know you touched on it a little bit, but...
I mentioned it. I see a very meaningful difference between occupation and annexation. Occupation means the Israeli military controls the area. Annexation is that the state will control the area legally, and I see it as a very big difference, and I'm really glad to see the annexation option probably removed.
Fantastic, thank you. We've got a couple of questions on Hodoveli. This one is from Kate Scott. So she asks, has Dr. Liel any comments to make regarding the appointment of, as new Israeli ambassador to the UK, Zippy Hodoveli, who lives in one of the settlements illegal under international law and has made racist and inflammatory remarks throughout her time as a member of the Knesset? There have been objections to her appointments, including from British Jews and peers in Parliament. I also have a question from Vincent Fien, who is our chair of the Balfour Project, and he asks, what role should the UK play, and will Mrs. Hodoveli help or hinder?
Yes. So first, I don't know if she was approved already as ambassador, but I think it's in the process. She doesn't live in a settlement. She lives inside Israel, but with her contemporary views, she will make a very bad ambassador. I hope that with time, she will understand where she's living and adjust a little bit. But from what it is seen now, the problem is that she lives in a biblical world. In a biblical world, this vocabulary that the land was given to us by God and nothing else matters, this I don't think can work in Britain. I think personally that her test case is the annexation. I hope that in every meeting she will have in London, the first question will be, do you support the annexation? If she says yes, she is in trouble in England. And if she says no, she is not Tsipi Hotobelli. So I think test her on this issue. Test her on this issue. She's a huge supporter of the annexation. And you can also test her on the issue of citizenship to Palestinians. But I think she's about to fail. She is about to cause damage to the Israeli-British relations. If she will change, she will surprise me.
Well, we'll have to watch this space, I guess. So the next question comes from John Hall. So I'm just going to read it to you. I don't quite understand all the fuss about Israel officially sanctioning the theft of Palestinian territory through annexation. It would be better for the civilized world if the theft were left unsanctioned. One, it would delay the Israeli authorities having to formally announce to the world that they approved the gross violation of human rights incurred in dispossessing the indigenous Palestinian population in the occupied territories. And two, on the other hand, for friends of Israel and the wider international community, a formal annexation of stolen land might force them to confront this abuse. It would be difficult for them to justify normal relations with an officially human rights-based abusing settler colonial apartheid state of Israel. There was a reluctance amongst many countries, including Britain, to introduce sanctions against and ostracize South Africa. Formalizing the colonization of Palestine by Israel could even force a UK core government to act in accordance with the new policies promoting human rights throughout the world, despite any poor reflection on Britain's own colonial past. Would the former ambassador agree with this analysis?
This was a long analysis and a long question. I'll do my best. I could sense also before annexation was suspended that part of my friends in Israel in the peace camp wanted it to happen. They wanted it to happen because they thought by doing so, Israel will cross the red line. And as long as Israel is not crossing the red line marked by the international community, meaning it's only occupation, it's only settlements, and so the reaction of the world is such that it cannot change the policy. But if we will annex, sanctions will come into the picture, and then Israel will really have to take the world seriously. I was against it all the time. And the reason is, especially because of my South African experience, I was in South Africa when sanctions were applied. I saw the result of it, but it needed the whole international community to be part of it. By the way, the last country, or the last two that joined the sanctions were Israel and Taiwan. And Israel was there until the end. And I saw how meaningful it was when we joined the sanctions, because we were the last oxygen balloon that the South Africans had. We are very, very, very far from this situation in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, especially because the United States, even under the Democrats, will not apply any sanctions on Israel. And big parts of the world, especially in Europe, will not do it. Many leaders in the world see Israel as fighting radical, aggressive Islam and so on, and as a democracy still. We are very far from applying sanctions that might work on Israel. So I'm glad that it didn't happen, that we didn't do such a move that will increase the pressure on Israel because I don't think the world, the new world, the world of today, COVID or not COVID, can get together and apply overwhelming sanctions on Israel or on any country. We see that it doesn't work on other countries too.
I've got a bunch of questions that I feel like you answered after they were asked. So we had some comments, for example, from Maggie Foyer, or Foyer, I'm not sure how to pronounce her surname, about Israel's claim to be alone surrounded by hostile Arab states and how the UAE deal impacts that. And you touched on that and said that it meant, you know, if the UAE deal wasn't going to work out quite as planned, that they would be looking to the Balkans for relationships, friendships, deals, and so forth. We had a question that came in about Israel's links with Russia and relationship with Russia. Do we see that? Any changes, significant changes to that coming in the future?
First, regarding the first half of the question, I must say that still, even after this Emirates deal, the country that is most important in the region for Israel is Egypt by far. I think the relations between Israel and Egypt are much more important than the relations with most of the European countries we are having. It's based on security, but it's very, very stable and has a huge, huge impact on the Palestinians and so on. The second half, what was the second half? On Russia.
Yeah, question from Magan
Yes.
Singodia.
Look, I think Netanyahu is an extremely experienced diplomat. Really, he first of all started his career, public career as a diplomat, a political appointed diplomat, but as a diplomat in our embassy in Washington. Then he was our ambassador in the UN 25 years ago. 35 years ago. 35 years ago, in the late 80s, and then he was periods of time a prime minister, foreign minister. He knows his way. He has his charisma, and he managed to develop a very, very stable and meaningful relations with Putin. And what we do today in the Middle East, bombarding from the air in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Gaza, and probably here and there also doing things in Iran, has, I don't know if to say a blessing, but a silent reaction for Moscow. And even in Syria, coordination with Moscow. So he is seen here in the Israeli public as a magician, He is continuing occupation now for 53 years with fantastic relations with the American president and almost symbiotic type of relations and very good relations with Putin. And the Israeli public says, what will happen if this guy disappears? Who will take care of Trump and who will take care of Putin? But so far, probably because of balance of power issues, the Soviets are not challenging our policy. And you must understand, we didn't speak about it, that Israel is the regional power militarily when it comes especially to the air, to the air forces, and we control the skies of the Middle East. And Israel is bombarding so frequently, I guess you hear about it in the world, and no reaction. I don't remember in the last 50, 60 attacks we had in Syria that anyone in Europe said a word. So as long as Israel can go on doing these things without, especially without Russia, that sees itself a player in Syria, reacting, the relations are seen to the Israeli public at least as very good.
Thanks for answering that question. We've got another one from Rosemary Veitch. Having just had my latest update from the International Crisis Group, which speaks of COVID-19 taking root in the Gaza Strip, do you have any means by which you can persuade the Israeli authorities to allow Gaza to obtain medical supplies it needs and to let the Strip's residents who are seriously ill to travel abroad to seek care? Do you have any comment on the situation in Gaza with regards to COVID?
First, I have a comment about Israel. We have a devastating second wave of coronavirus in Israel. We have the #1 patients, sick people per day in the world per capita. So the situation in Israel is terrible, deteriorating. We have night closures on 40 cities. This will definitely affect things here in Israel. A lot of tensions. Many of the sick people are ultra-Orthodox or Arabs, and the tensions are mounting, and the economic implications are around the corner and already felt. From what we hear about Gaza, there are very few cases relatively. We know that it's a time bomb. Then if it will happen there, they don't have the medical ability to deal with a big number of patients, and it might come, and then we definitely should help and allow the world to help. But even Gazan friends of mine that I asked them about the figures give me very low figures. So the worry about Gaza is mostly if things will deteriorate. They did not deteriorate in Gaza, COVID-wise, COVID-wise, not economic-wise. Economic situation in Gaza is terrible, but COVID-wise, there is no deterioration at the moment, as I know. If it will come, Israel will have to even enable the world to come and assist, because I don't know what we can do with our COVID here, with our problems.
The next bunch of questions are related to one state, two state. As you can imagine, we had quite a few questions on those. So I'm going to give you 3 questions so you can talk around them and hopefully answer them. One is from Steve France. Isn't a blow to the two-state illusion necessary to reunite Palestinians and address the whole mess? Then we have Mike Joseph, who asks, surely this makes a one-state solution the only credible goal? And Tony Greenstein asks, can Alon Liel imagine a democratic, unitary state of all its citizens? If not, then there is no solution. So those are some big ones there for you, sorry.
Oh, heavy ones, but I, in a way, addressed it. I believe still in 2 states, but this cannot happen without the world. The Palestinians cannot achieve it on their own. Israel will not volunteer to do it. Without the world becoming a major player on this issue, for instance, demanding the implementation of UN Security Resolution 2334 from December 2016. You have it in writing. It was 14 countries in favor with the abstention of the United States. Without the world demanding the implementation of 2334, we will not have a Palestinian state. So it depends on the world. Also here, even individual countries can make a difference. Look at the difference that the Emirates did on the annexation. One country with a bright idea, with a lot of money behind it, with a lot of economic power behind it, made a huge difference. It might happen again that one leader, different from the leadership we have today in Europe or elsewhere, or any other place in the world, one leader will be determined enough to go on with its demand for two states. It can make a difference. But I stress again, without the world, it is not going to happen. I don't see the ingredients inside the Palestinian society and inside the Israeli society that can help us bake this two-state cake. We don't have the ingredients. We have to import them. Now, about the one state. If you would ask a person like me, for me, I'm Jewish, I'm Israeli, I'm Zionist, I was a diplomat for over 30 years, but for me, democracy comes before Judaism. I'm more a Democrat than a Jew. Definitely, I'm not a religious Jew. So if anyone in the globe would promise me that if we have a one state, the Palestinians and the Jews will be equal, fully equal, including in their political rights, I don't love it. My parents came over from Germany to establish a Jewish state. I will not love it, but I can live with it. But again, from my know-how on the Israeli society, the Jewish part of the Israeli society, this cannot happen. This cannot happen. And if you want to understand why this cannot happen, go read the 2 years old nation-state law that the Knesset approved in July 2 years ago, 2018, that keeps the Jewish public above the Arab public. And this is only a preparation it was planned as a preparation to the annexation, that to clarify to the Palestinians that if the Arabs in Israel are not equal, they definitely will not be equal. So I don't see again the Israeli society, the Jewish part of the Israeli society, granting full citizenship and full voting rights to the Palestinians. So this is the reason I don't support such an option.
I've got kind of final comment question for you, because we're coming to the end of our time. It's been so interesting listening to you, and we're really grateful that you're part of our lecture series. We're trying to get a bunch of different speakers on different topics relating to this issue. So it's been super interesting. We had a question from John Pullman, specifically about the Balfour Project. What are the campaigning objectives of the Balfour Project? So I should say this is the Balfour Project in the UK, Scottish Registered Charity. That's the organisation running these online lectures. And the main aim is to get Britain to accept its responsibility in the region, its historical responsibility, and to set things right by recognizing the Palestinian state alongside the Israeli state and the human rights of everyone involved and present there. So hopefully that's cleared that up. We've got an amazing, brand spanking new website, balfourproject.org. Please go head over there, have a look in the readings, the resources section. We've got essential reading. We've got all of our recordings of our past events, and this one will be up there as well. If we've posted in there. If you are finding these talks interesting, then please do make a donation, because it really does help us to be able to continue our work. So to conclude, Doctor, we would really very much love to hear your thoughts on what people, the citizens and the residents in Britain should be doing to keep this issue in the limelight and to push forward towards that just peace.
First, I don't think even the leaders of your Balfour project, and I know they know a lot about Israel, understand what happened to the name Balfour in Israel. It's difficult to grasp. When I was 6 years old, I learned about Balfour in the school, all of us. Balfour was the creator of the Jewish state. When you say Balfour now, Balfour has a very negative connotation. Most of the Israelis who say Balfour now identify it with Netanyahu because of his residence. So, and the demonstrations in Israel against Netanyahu are called the Balfour demonstrations. It's so funny, but keep it in mind. Now, I still think that the main aim of people who want to help the Palestinians is to work for West European recognition of a Palestinian state. And I know approximately the leaders of Western Europe today. It's very, very difficult to confront Israel directly on this issue because Israel is considered a strong country. I don't know how strong we will be after this COVID-19. We are definitely getting weaker, but leaders in Europe say we have our problems, we don't need a conflict with Israel. But those who really feel that Britain has the responsibility for Israeli-Palestinian coexistence or peace, and it has, more than any other country in the world, should try and convince public circles, NGOs, governmental circles that a Palestinian statehood should be announced and work on it. Another thing that I think could work and is important now is to build in Britain a Jewish-Palestinian joint advocacy for a Palestinian state. Very important, very important. Unfortunately, there is not enough energy behind the Palestinian diplomacy for many reasons, many reasons. Maybe it's a kind of exhaustion, but I think there has to be more creativity in the public work in Britain for a Palestinian state, and I think we can build a Jewish-Palestinian dialogue in Britain. There are enough liberal Jews that can be part of it, enough Palestinians who are two-staters, who are pro-democracy, who are pro-peace, who can work together in Britain, and then it can spill over to other countries in the world, especially other European countries, and create a new way of dealing with it publicly. Of course, the governments are deciding, but what's happening in the grassroots on this aspect can prepare the background for change also on the governmental level.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to all the people that came along today to listen and to share their thoughts and their questions. You've made for a very lively debate, and we always encourage and enjoy that. So I'm going to thank you again, Doctor, and wish you the best. And everyone have a lovely evening, and we'll see you next month. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye-bye.